Where does this car come from? Where does this Audi come from? These are the simple questions my team and I ask us every day. My name is Marco Filippi and I'm leading the supply chain sustainability team at Audi. And let me tell you, the answers to such a simple question, where does this Audi come from, can be quite complex in our case. We sure know where we produce our cars, but where do all the components and subcomponents come from? Where do all the raw materials come from? And under which conditions and with how many CO2 emissions were they produced? We are the ones striving to answer all those questions because we need the answers to execute our sustainable supply chain strategy. Our vision is to create a positive impact in and throughout our Audi supply chain. But let's go one step back. A modern car is a product with one of the most complex supply chains you will find. And the more complex a supply chain, the more challenging it is to ensure sustainability requirements along that chain. And when we talk about electric cars, they may have less components, but from a sustainability point of view, they're even more challenging, especially the battery. On the one hand, the battery is one of the most energy-intensive components, which is relevant for CO2 emissions. In 2025, almost a quarter of all of Audi's carbon emissions will be produced in the supply chain and in the production process. And on the other hand, the battery uses raw materials which are often linked to sustainability risks. Just think of cobalt and lithium. For us at Audi, managing a sustainable supply chain is about responsibility. Responsibility towards our environment and our natural resources, responsibility towards the people working in and for our supply chain, and last but not least, responsibility to our customers. At Audi, we are convinced that within and through our supply chain, we can make a difference, a positive impact for global sustainability. But why do we think so? Because Audi is relevant. As a customer, Audi is interacting with more than 16,000 direct suppliers and business partners in more than 150 countries. And as a customer, we can decide what are the criteria for business partners that enter our Audi supply chain. These are the criteria that can help to transform single suppliers or even industries towards more sustainability. And this is what we do with our supplier sustainability rating since July 1st last year. Every supplier who will enter the Audi supply chain has to pass a screening process on how they act in terms of social and environmental aspects as well as corporate ethics. No positive rating, no business with Audi. And to give you an impression, in 2019 we processed more than 12,000 supplier self-assessments and conducted more than 1,200 on-site visits to generate this rating. The rating is great, but we want to be even more proactive. We want to shape supply chain sustainability in three main areas. First, environment, second, people, and third, innovation. Let's start with environment. With its portfolio of passenger cars, the Volkswagen Group causes 1% of global man-made carbon emissions. Recognizing this responsibility, the Volkswagen Group, including Audi, was one of the first to follow the Paris Climate Agreement. Our vision is to become carbon neutral on balance until 2050. As already said, with about 25% of future CO2 emissions caused in the supply chain and production, a CO2 supply chain management plays an enormously important role in reaching our goal. This is why in 2018 we launched our Audi CO2 program in the supply chain. With this program, we strive to improve the carbon balance in the supply chain even before our vehicles complete their first kilometer on the road. So far, we have identified more than 50 measures in workshops with our suppliers that are helping us to reduce carbon emissions. These efforts could cut 1.2 tons of carbon per vehicle by 2025. Examples how we reach this are the use of regenerative energies like the use of green electricity in battery cell production, or the establishment of recycling processes and the closure of material cycles. 3 years ago, we launched the aluminum closed loop concept, in which we follow the principle of closed loop recycling management. The aluminum closed loop ensures that high-grade aluminum scrap is fed back into our Audi material supply chain, instead of being sold for profit on the scrap metal market. One of the benefits is that using this secondary aluminum enables high energy savings of up to 95% compared with primary aluminum. This means our closed loop aluminum process alone enabled us to save 150,000 tons of CO2 emissions in 2019. Talking about raw materials, and especially the procurement of raw materials, brings me to our next strategy area: people. Respecting and protecting human rights is a key priority for Audi. Living up to this is one of our biggest challenges. Why? Because our supply chains are highly complex and highly volatile. Just imagine, on average, an Audi is made of around 1,600 kilograms of different raw materials using almost the entire periodic table. Every raw material has a different supply chain, and some raw materials undergo 9 stages before they come into direct contact with Audi. And by the time the part or material reaches our factories, its supply chain in the entry level may already have changed several times, with some companies leaving it and others taking their place. To handle this challenge, we have a threefold strategy. First, focus. Second, set and use standards. And third, transparency and traceability. First, focus. Based on an independent raw material risk analysis, our raw material activities currently focus on 16 highly critical raw materials. One of the most relevant at present are, of course, the battery materials like cobalt and lithium. Currently, we're involved in various initiatives in this field to drive new standards and to create tools which enable us to protect human rights and social standards throughout our complete supply chain, even down to the extraction of raw materials. Some of the most important initiatives are the Global Battery Alliance, the Responsible Minerals Initiative, and the Drive Sustainability Initiative with the Raw Materials Observatory. Supported and guided by standards from these initiatives and requirements like the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains, the Volkswagen Group and Audi, in close collaboration with our battery cell suppliers, are pursuing the objective of creating complete supply chain transparency from mining the raw materials to manufacturing of the finished product. Currently, generating this transparency is highly demanding and still a lot of manual work. This is why we need technology. Only technology will enable us to generate full transparency at a fingertip and bring us closer to our vision of traceability. And this leads us to a last sustainability strategy field, innovation. We at Audi believe in progress through technology. This is why we intensively use new technologies to further increase transparency and traceability in our supply chains. As already illustrated, this is often difficult because supply chains are complex and constantly changing. By using new technologies like blockchain, it might be possible to allow greater insight into the provenance of the raw materials like cobalt and lithium used for our vehicles, and also the suppliers involved along the tier levels. It might even be possible to track changes. But in the near future, 100% supply chain transparency and traceability is hardly possible. Until we get there, we use new technologies like artificial intelligence to improve our global screening and prediction skills. We use AI to identify sustainability risks at an early stage by systematically screening various online sources, such as social media. By doing this, AI helps us to respond in time or even predict events. We also pilot new communication channels and grievance mechanisms to help us to react fast and responsibly towards incidents. Especially the last strategy part, the innovation part, is driven by interaction with all the different stakeholders. Many of the ideas we found come to us by applying new forms of collaboration, like hackathons, stakeholder dialogues, and others. I'm curious what will be the next idea, and I'm looking forward to it. Together, we can make a difference.